Okay, 6 o'clock, so welcome everyone for our first council meeting in April of 2026. First of all, we acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle-Walyup area, and we recognize that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. I also acknowledge that we meet here today on land that was never ceded, and I wholeheartedly support the many campaigns for truth-telling, justice, and reconciliation, both here and across this country. So for anyone who hasn't been to a meeting before, I'll just let you know that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. And while all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question, you may be captured in the recording, so just know that. Now the sounds really echoey and loud, so we'll get through this one tonight, don't worry. But we'll go with attendance, apologies, and leaves of absence. We've got 2 leaves of absence for Councillor Jeff Graham and Councillor Frank Mofflin, who are both not with us tonight. Do we have any other applications from elected members for leaves of absence? Seeing none, we'll go to disclosures of interest. Great, okay, seeing none. The responses to previous public questions that were taken on notice, those can be found on the agenda. So if you have any questions about those, you can follow up with those, but they're in the agenda. And now we move on to public question time. So seeing as this is the planning meeting of the month, we have 5 registered speakers. And what we can do is we can either have you speak during public question time, or well, as a council, we can change the agenda and move the items that are going to be spoke on first, so that way then you can speak right before each item. So whatever you prefer, if you want to speak during public question time, that's fine. Then you can go ahead and leave and watch the rest of the meeting online, or you can stay and watch it here, or you can choose to speak before your item is. But we have 4 different items, so you may be first or last in that order, depending upon the numerical order. But we do have at least one person here who wishes to speak just to general questions and statements, and that's Mei Ring Chen. Great. Mei Ring, for people that don't know, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of that 3 minutes, an alarm will sound. No worries. If you haven't finished after 3 minutes, we just ask that you try to wrap it up as quickly as you can at that point.
Do I have to switch this on, or?
Oh, no, maybe just try.
Hello? Oh.
There you go. Great. Go ahead, Mei Ring.
Okay. I'm extremely concerned about the radiation I'm constantly exposed to while out and about in Fremantle. Where I live, the radio frequency measurements along South Street between Carrington Street to Hines Road are high to extreme. There is a daycare center along this part of South Street. The public transport is also riddled with EMR. In 1971, the Naval Medical Research Institute published a research report into microwave and radio frequency radiation. 2,311 references are listed. Some of them go back as far as 1934, meaning that effects of radiation from microwave were already known that long ago. In August 2021, the Children's Health Defense achieved a historic legal victory when the US Court of Appeal ruled that the Federal Communications Commission failed to properly consider non-cancer evidence regarding the adverse health effect of wireless technology when it maintained its 1996 radio frequency emission guidelines. Some of the experienced side effects are headache, difficulty sleeping, tinnitus, heart palpitation, arrhythmia, memory loss, brain fog, loss of cognitive function, infertility, and cancer. It is estimated that around 30% of Americans experience side effects from radio frequency but don't know what is causing it. 5% are sick enough to make the connection, and 1% are so severely impacted that they are disabled. APANSA sets the public exposure limit for radio frequency and electromagnetic energy from telecommunications infrastructure, such as mobile phone base station, at 10 million microwatt per square meter for frequencies used by 5G. This limit varies by frequency, ranging from 2 to 10 million microwatt per square meter, depending on the specific operating frequency, which is 100 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. The higher the frequency, the higher the energy. Do we have to wait until cancer clusters appear in the community? Recommended limits by building biology for bedroom is less than 0.1 microwatt per square meter. In China, limit is set at 400,000, and in Russia and Italy at 100,000 microwatt per square meter. We can take measures to reduce exposure inside our own homes. What about those who live almost next to a tower and in the public spaces? Does the council actually do any research before approving the installation of 5G towers, or just blindly rely on what Apansa says is safe? 4G provided all the capability for a normal mobile end user requirement. For normal consumer use, we do not need 5G and certainly not 6G. 5G has been set up for 15-minute city. Both 5 and 6G is more about automation, sensing, artificial intelligence. It is an industrial, commercial, and government use case. It is to enable AI. This equals to total surveillance. Thank you.
That was nearly 3 minutes exactly, Mei-Ring. Thank you so much. A lot of that, we'll probably have to take that on notice. There was a few questions there that we can probably get back to you on the next minutes, but thank you for coming. Appreciate that. Now, I've got 4 other folks. We have Ben Lewis, Steve Hanna, Simon Burnell, and Nicole Caesar. Do any of you wish to speak during public question time, or wait for your item to come up on the agenda in that order? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Everyone wants to wait? Okay, wonderful. Then what we'll do is we have petitions, none that I'm aware of. Nope. We have no deputations, no presentations. The confirmation of minutes from the last meeting. Can I ask someone to move? Councillor Slaughter, and seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong. All those in favor? All those against? That's unanimous. Good. Elected member communication. Is there any elected member communication this evening? Councillor Van Dorsen.
Sorry, turned it off. We just got some good news today for Leighton Beach or Leighton Boulevard. That has we've got a new speed limit there, 30 kilometres an hour, which is a great outcome for the community. So I just want to thank the City of Fremantle officers and Main Roads for supporting the community in their request and getting it done so quickly. The community's super happy, making it a safer place. So it's signage was installed today. It was great to see. Hopefully we can get more of that around the city. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. Councillor Clark.
I just wanted to thank our city events team for a huge international street arts festival. It was fantastic. The streets were packed again. There were some incredible acts, and thanks to those acts who did travel from far away and in challenging conditions at the moment to still get here and to be here to provide such an amazing free weekend for everybody who came to Fremantle. And also I went to the North Freo Social Farms Easter egg hunt. That was loads of fun. They had over 2,000 eggs at the social farm, and there were heaps of kids. I can't even think how many were there, but it was a huge turnout and a new record for the number of children and parents who turned up. And the farm itself was still perfectly intact when they left. It was very impressive. So everyone had a great weekend, hopefully. So that's terrific.
Great, wonderful. And just I'll note that both of those events were 100% free for the public. And there was also the Hilton Precinct had organized the Easter egg hunt on Good Friday morning as well. That was very well attended by families and folks in that area as well. There's a lot of good fun happening around the city this weekend. All right, so is there any other elected member communication? No, wonderful. Then we'll move on to the reports and recommendations for officers, but we're going to skip number 1 and go to number 2 because it's the 95 Watkins Street, the Wycombe Valley unauthorized regulated tree removal. Then we have Ben Lewis here to speak on that item. Great, Ben, you'll have 3 minutes. Yep, and when if you hear an alarm go off at this end of the room, that means your time's up, and just try to finish up as quickly as you can. Thank you.
No worries, thank you. Good evening. Hi, as mentioned, I'm Ben Lewis. I'm the owner of the property at 95 Watkins. So I'm sort of assuming that you've maybe read some of the background info to the case. But look, I just wanted to take an opportunity to be open and transparent regarding to the events of, it was a bit low, leading to the what I deemed the urgent removal of 4 white gum tree species from my property. It just wanted noted that the officer comments did not include any of the personal safety concerns that I raised during the initial correspondence of the matter late last year. So I'd like to take an opportunity to please raise and make aware to the council of the impending safety concerns raised in regard to the removal of these trees. On the night of the 13th of August 25, the suburb and the surrounding areas of Freo and Greater Perth experienced sudden significant wind gusts that evening. It caused a number of trees to be damaged and fall within the White Gum area, including, on my property, an extremely large branch weighing over 300 kilos that landed next to my front door while still attached to the tree. So it was actually suspended at the time. Our family vehicle was trapped underneath that branch. We caused a fair bit of stress and duress during this event. Our trampoline was lifted through the backyard and slammed up against our house. So we were quite worried about the safety of our family and our home. We did make a call to the SCS that evening. Unfortunately, due to the high volumes of urgent support required on that night, given that we had a second vehicle for means of escape, it was deemed that there were more urgent priorities to attend. We awoke the next morning to several fallen branches and heavily impacted 4 white gum broken trees on our front driveway. So as I mentioned, our car was impacted, so was our shed and our caravan. And upon inspection, we noted that several of these branches had not completely fallen and was still able to cause harm to our family when using our front door. So just for context, it was 2 metres from our front door, a very large, 8 metre long, 400 plus or 300, 400 plus kilo branch. As such, I called our local tree management company, a local Fremantle company, and upon attending, it was decided the best course of action to mitigate the risk to personal safety to my family was to remove the damaged trees quite urgently. Subsequently, several months later, in a different set of issues, we did submit a building approval for renovations to gentrify and upgrade our original 1952 build. So in that approval, it was noted that we unlawfully removed those trees as part of proceeding with a build without approval. Those trees were, the removal of those had nothing to do with that building approval at the time, despite the officer notes stating otherwise. So I did outline all this to the, all of these above items to the planner at the time. I was then advised to submit a separate planning application to cover the retrospective removal of the trees. This was submitted within 24 hours and was also accompanied by a tree management plan for replacement of the removed trees. It is worth noting that my application approval for my renovations was placed on hold during this time, and I still have not received any feedback or approval as such. Look, we have a lot of trees on the property. We're pretty passionate and in regards to sustainability. We've planted over 20 native trees since moving there 4 years ago. We still have white gums, marries, paperbarks and large eucalypts on the property, and aspirations to put a native verge garden in place at the conclusion of our renovations once complete. So look, we're a family that's passionate about sustainability and value the environment and often spend time identifying all the bird species that frequent our native trees. So in summary, I think we believe we acted with the best of intentions to protect and maintain the safety of our family during the events leading up to the decision to remove those 4 damaged trees from our property. We did so with an understanding of the policy regarding tree retention and acted urgently to avoid potential harm to our family and public safety. So we also feel that we don't believe it's fair of this council to penalise us for this action, given the reasons that I've outlined above. In addition to the stress we've already experienced and also the financial outlay required to achieve these outcomes, I hope you feel the same way. And if you have any follow-up queries, I'd welcome an opportunity to discuss further. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I went over time.
It's all right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. It was important to get all that out, and thank you for sending through the information prior to the meeting as well. Are there any questions from elected members for Mr. Lewis? Councillor Kamara.
Yeah, I have one question. Yeah, thanks for coming in and outlining how this came about. So 4 trees obviously were removed. Were all 4 trees damaged in the gusts of wind that you experienced on that night?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a very large one that had most of the branches fall off and damaged the 3 other smaller ones, including the caravan, the shed and the car that I mentioned. One of them landed on the neighbour's driveway. He's here tonight, so that's Mike. So he helped me with the clean-up, so yeah.
And was there an option to just lop the trees that experienced the most damage, or how did it come about to remove the whole 4? That's
Yeah.
like, I can understand your concerns and safety. I've been there myself in that situation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, look, I'd probably say I was emotionally compromised. We're pretty stressed. We brought the tree removal guy out. He's fairly pragmatic. He maintains those trees on an annual basis, and he said, "Look, mate, you look at what you're dealing with here. There was a lot of, like, probably over half the branches of those trees had already fallen, and we just didn't feel it was worth taking the risk, given how close it was to the front door of our house. I've got 2 young girls who use that front entry all the time. I just, it didn't feel like it was the right thing to leave them standing at the time. But to answer your question, retrospectively, if you weren't emotionally compromised, you'd maybe think a bit logically, take a different approach, perhaps. Maybe try and prune them, and then seek an arborist approval or a risk assessment to see where we're actually sitting with that. So yeah, it's a good point that you raise.
Councillor Slaughter?
Hi, thanks for coming in. Do you feel that you have evidence that you can produce to demonstrate to our satisfaction the clause that you refer to, 2.1FA, that it was a risk to your safety? Do you have anything from that tree maintenance company or anything to that regard that you could provide to the city to show that?
I've got the photos of all the damaged trees hanging off the shed and the caravan and the car and where it was to the front door. So I've got those photos. I've got witnesses from neighbours, including Mike, who's here tonight, as I mentioned, and Steve from Assured Tree Services. I've spoken to him in the lead up to this, and he said he'd be willing to, provide a witness statement to give his sort of view on what he saw at the time. But not anything formal in terms of a formal risk assessment, if that's what you're asking, but certainly documented evidence, the call log to the SCS and a couple of other bits. Whether that meets your needs, I'm not clear on what those are, but I'm happy to have a look at that separately.
Did you provide that when you applied for a retrospective approval for removal of the trees?
I did, yeah. I also put together a tree management plan outlining the installation of 8 new Banksia species, which I've now subsequently also planted. So, yeah.
Okay, I think that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned some branches fell on your vehicles in your shed. Was there an insurance claim that resulted from that, or resulted in needing to fix anything?
Yeah, no, we didn't log it with insurance. We did make an attempt. In terms of wanting to try and cover some of that tree impact on insurance, we didn't end up formalising a claim there. So no, nothing that I have on record. The damage to the car, we're pretty fortunate. It was just a couple of dents on the roof, and the damage to the shed was just a ripped off gutter with some tiles that I was able to put back in place myself. With the costs of trying to get the trees repaired, we weighed that up as a safety priority versus trying to put an insurance claim through for sort of menial damages, is what I describe it.
Great. Seeing no other questions, thank you for your time. We'll into the item if there's someone to move and second the item. Was there anyone else in the gallery that wished to speak to this item? Seeing none. Okay. Can I have ask someone to move the item? Councillor Williamson Wong, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Williamson Wong.
Thanks. I thank you for coming to speak to us this evening. That was really helpful. And I think the questions from other elected members have also been helpful. I suspect I'm not alone, not that I want to speak for everyone, that my view or thought on the item has changed slightly since we've heard from you, so thanks. I guess I want to start with a question of staff to ask for a response to what we've just heard in terms of there being a clause in our policy that talks to the risk of safety, and if that was an issue for someone and they chose to remove trees because they felt that there was a risk, why did the officers not consider that that was appropriate as part of the item tonight?
Through the chair, unfortunately I can't see any information that was mentioned in terms of evidence from the tree maintenance company. Those photos did come through today, obviously. I think if the owner had come to the city at the time, we could have sent our teams out to have a look and help provide that advice. But unfortunately, we just don't have that evidence to be able to confirm if it's an urgent work that would be exempt from needing approval. When people are asking to remove trees because of the health of them, because of the danger, that's what that arborist information is for. If it is something that's imminently about to fall down and it's very clearly able to be shown, and then that call should be made at the time so we can come out and have a look.
So a follow-up question, I might have a couple. The first is that, is there then, I guess, an issue with how our policy is set up to require members of our community who might have experienced limbs falling off trees, etc., to then somehow get contact with a member of our staff to go and look at trees? That would be the process. A limb would fall down, you'd have to leave it there, ask a city employee to come and assess it, have an arborist report written, and then use that to justify. If it was a retrospective approval, I understand that what you're saying is that this information wasn't known when the officer report was perhaps written and that it's come in after, which perhaps council wishes to then defer this and whether or not we can have that considered. But separately, the question is, would that be the process? If a tree limb falls, that landowner or occupier is then required to ask a city staff member to look at the tree before it gets removed?
Through the chair, it really is a case of whether the owner's wanting to remove the tree or not. I think if every branch fell, it's going to be a case-by-case basis as well. If there is a significant concern for safety, it's more just bringing that information to us up front. If something is about to fall down immediately and the SES is going, let's bring this down before it causes damage to property, then obviously it comes down. Like with any other building or wall, there are provisions in the regulations that say if there is an imminent threat to safety, then that work needs to occur. So we do, our compliance team are, have requirements under emergency management requirements. So if there's a big storm and something needs to come down, those options are available. Unfortunately, it's just we don't have, in this particular case, we don't have the ability to assess that. We are available as a planning team, compliance team and our parks teams to give that advice if people are concerned, and people do call up and observe trees or see things happening on site. And look, we are small teams, we do the best we can. But if, there are people who are experienced in tree maintenance that can give people advice, and usually these big trees need someone with expertise to bring them down and lop them anyway. So as long as that conversation is happening, there are ways in the policy to make sure safety is looked after and those regulated trees are assessed for removal.
I have a question. So we're being asked a retrospective development approval application for the removal of these trees, and the staff are saying that there wasn't enough evidence provided to do that. Now, if this is supported by council tonight, then would the next steps be looking at what maybe the person has already done to plant more trees and see if they've met the conditions as far as remediation for that, or what would be the next steps for the city to do if this is supported?
Through the chair, yes, that would be one of the steps. Our compliance team would assess the site, see what has been removed and test it against the policy. They might issue a directions to say additional trees need to be planted. And then there are avenues under the Act to take enforcement action and penalise the landowner.
And if the landowner has already planted replacement trees that fit the policy, would that potentially satisfy the city?
Through the chair, but potentially. That doesn't sit within my area, so it would be something that the team would need to undertake an investigation and determine whether it's viable to go down that path.
I don't believe you've spoken on the item yet, and as the mover, you also get to close.
Fantastic. Just wanted to confirm before I accidentally closed debate on everyone. Yes, I haven't asked a question. I haven't spoken. I've only asked questions. I think my view on this item, which I will put, is that I'm going to flag a deferral for 2 weeks so that the information that's been shared this evening can be taken into consideration. I guess I understand your point, Mayor, about whether trees have already been planted, but compliance and enforcement might also, for an unauthorised development action, include a penalty, etc. And so I think this policy, it is we're in the early stages of this policy, and we are trying to figure out how it actually works. And this is a good learning moment for everyone, I think, to be clear about we are not going to just allow people to cut down trees and then come to us after and say, I'm really sorry that I cut down the trees and I'm going to plant them elsewhere, because the whole intention is to keep mature trees on property. And I really stand by that. However, the circumstances that were shared tonight, I think, require investigation more than we can deal with in a council meeting right now. Perhaps staff come to the same view as is presented to us. Perhaps they come to a different view. My preference would be to allow for that information to go through a proper process, and whether or not there are tweaks to our policy that need, or I don't know, some explanatory material to make sure that community members know if there's a storm and limbs fall down. Nobody wants to end up at a council meeting saying, I'm really sorry for trees coming down if they're under stress. But we need to be clear about the expectations. And I think the expectation should remain that mature trees need to stay in and up on property when they can. But in these circumstances, I would be, flagging a deferral on this.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson Wong. Councillor Kamada?
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate the comments of Councillor Williamson Wong. In light of the fact that there's not an alternative here, and with the information that we've been given today and also in your email, I'd like to see a situation where the city can negotiate with the applicant and we can remediate the situation to the satisfaction of the city. It's not ideal, obviously, for trees to be removed without the approval of the city, and we need to protect our canopy, and we know that people will abuse the situation if it's not dealt with adequately. But as highlighted by Councillor Williamson Wong, in this circumstance, I think it would be a good outcome to have a deferral and that we can regroup at a later date.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Just a question first. The Speaker indicated that their planning approval for unrelated matters may be being held up. Is that something that would be the case, and is that something that the manager could investigate to see whether that's appropriate?
Through the chair, I believe there is another application in for structures where these trees have been removed from. So I think that it was possibly suggested to the applicant to separate out the matters so the trees could be dealt with, and they would then know if replacement trees are needing to be planted, that they could design the structures around ensuring there was enough room. But I would need to have a look at where that application is at.
If I may, so if no one else was going to speak, I certainly agree with Councillor Williamson Wong. I think we need all the information in front of us. I haven't seen photographs. That was the first thing that came to mind, that when I read the letter, if there was an insurance claim and the like, I know what I would have been doing, which would have been running around with the camera and taking a picture of everything. So I'd like to see some of that. It may not influence my decision about whether the regulated tree should have been removed, but it might influence, I guess, either the council or the city's thinking in terms of what steps need to be then taken. And I think that's reasonable. I would like to see the matters separated. Where the trees are, as far as I understand, are not part of a development application. It's a huge front yard. If there is a requirement to plant new trees, I'm pretty confident that they have enough room on their lot to do so. So I would certainly support the staff looking at separating the matters out. But I might move as a procedural motion a deferral.
Is that seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong? And if you wish to speak to the deferral, Councillor Sullivan, you may.
No, I think it speaks for itself.
Does the seconder wish to speak to the deferral? No. Do you have a question, Councillor Slaughter?
No, I wanted to join the debate.
A procedural motion has been moved to defer this item. No, that's okay. I'm happy to, if you have something to say, I'm happy to let you say it, though.
I will say it in 2 weeks.
Wonderful. So the motion before us now is a deferral, and the reason for the deferral, is that accurate? What's on the screen? Wonderful. All right, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favor? That is unanimous. And if I may advise Mr. Lewis, I would perhaps engage the arborist who came up for the trees and have them maybe write you up a report as well. So wonderful. All right, the next item that we have a speaker is for 7 Ord Street, and that's item 4 on our agenda. And that's an unauthorized external fixture to the existing grouped dwelling, or otherwise known as an antenna. And we've got Steve Hanna here to speak on it. Steve?
Good evening, members, officers. Thank you very much for letting me speak. It's a great surprise, such a small, tiny project like myself's. I should be given about 2 milliseconds, not 2 minutes, I think, compared with some of the big projects that you guys are handling. I'm not sure whether you received this. I only put it in this morning. You got my notes from this morning, so I shouldn't even need 2 minutes to do that. I just want to hit some highlights, which I think may not have been adequately emphasised in the report from the Planning Department. Before I do that, I'd really like to give a great shout out to your Planning Department. They really, really helped me through the process. I hadn't got a bloody clue, didn't even know I needed an application. And they held my hand, told me what to do, led me through it, gave me the options, and unfortunately they came up with a result, which is fair enough. That's fine. To recap, the scope of the application was to add a new antenna for amateur radio purposes to an existing mast and guy arrangement that's been on the house since it was built. 7 Ord Street is near the corner of Ord and High Street. I've lived there for about 17 years this year. So the mast with a TV antenna on top of it has been there 27 years. Last October, I tried to augment my amateur radio capabilities by putting a new antenna on top. It is a big antenna, but it's only a very, very simple design compared with normal TV antennas. Normal TV antennas have 2 dozen, 3 dozen elements and very complex and look very cluttered. My amateur radio antenna is simple 3 elements, but it's a big sucker. It caused by mainly due to the frequencies I'm operating on. And I do talk to over 100 countries around the world on a regular basis. So and just a quick word on ham radio. Ham radio is a big unknown to lots of people. The benefits of ham radio are well hidden. Societal, community, emergency. I can go on. I've got some great examples of where I've contributed to safety, particularly marine safety, as a radio amateur, and more than happy to discuss either online or offline or outside of this meeting. In a nutshell, I greatly respect the neighbours and don't wish to alienate them in any way. The neighbour who the antenna most impacts is 239 High Street. The report is a little bit maybe misleading to some extent because the map that shows the potential impacted areas, if you look at the map clearly, most of those areas are either from the south are covered tiny patios, which are hardly used to be honest, but all but one of them is covered. No, sorry, I'll wrap up. And everywhere else is either too far away or the other very close property is covered in tree foliage, and they can't even see the house, let alone the antenna or the mast or anything. So the one that's impacted is 239 High Street. And they did used to have a really nice green foliage canopy with, as I say in my report, a very healthy, large lemon tree, which was covered in bougainvillea, together with overflow from the olive tree next door and a jacaranda coming in from the other side. Their needs for renovations caused them to totally denude the whole backyard. I used to look at green all the time. Now I can count the peas on the plate when they're having dinner. Finally, please read through my proposals. I would intend to declutter the antenna, make it simple, and possibly explore alternates which are far less impactful. And I'm very, very grateful for the motion I saw only this morning, a proposed alternative motion from Councillor Sullivan, which could possibly, with your approval, give me more time to explore alternatives, smaller antennas, a cleaner, more elegant solution, which would be happy for the neighbours, make my neighbours happy, make my wife happy, and also meet council approvals. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you so much, Steve Hannon. I'll just say I used to be your neighbor in one of those little courtyards, and we were constantly out there. And I never noticed the antenna ever. Are there any questions for Mr. Hanno? No? All right, I'll note that we have an office recommendation and an alternate recommendation, either which can be moved and seconded for debate.
I might move my alternative recommendation.
Is there someone to second it? Councillor Van Dorsen. All right. Do you wish to speak to
Thank
it?
you. Yeah. The issue, as someone that's been in Fremantle for quite a few decades, there was a time when these types of very large aerials were quite common because reception in Fremantle, and I'm talking about TV aerials, but as the applicant has said, the mast was there effectively previously, and I can understand perfectly why it was there previously, because not only are they on the west side of the Limestone Ridge, they would have also been in a shadow from the apartment block that sits immediately uphill from there. And it's not the only taller mast in that precinct that's left. I can think of one or two others, and I know there are quite a lot. My neighbour over the road has one as well, because he has a big building right next to him. And I'm pretty sure he's not digital. So the reality is this is for a different purpose, but they are a remnant from certainly an era, and quite frankly, I don't ever remember, as an architect, ever applying for an approval for an aerial. Perhaps that's a more modern thing required by our scheme. So I think there has to be a little bit of give and take on this, and I'm buoyed by the fact that the applicant, after I drafted my alternative recommendation, has indicated that there may well be a number of things that can be done to improve the aesthetic or the scale of it. Some of them sounded like overkill, like changing the box on the bottom. I don't think is a big issue, but certainly if there's a slimmer version of that, the neighbour would probably be appreciative, and maybe by then the trees might grow again. So I think, a 3 I had asked at one stage the staff to consider 5 years, but I think the 3-year approach is probably the better one. And in that time, hopefully there'll be a new application for a modified version.
Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thanks. And thanks, Councillor Sullivan, for the alternative motion. I agree with what you were just saying also about the 3-year term, and hopefully we'll see perhaps a different design. But I am happy to support the alternative motion this evening. I think while that was a very great setting of context that you gave us this evening, Mr. Hanna, it's also good for us to go, well, for me, as well, to go back to what we're actually being asked to decide on, and that is that there is a discretion afforded to council for allowing an external fixture, and our decision needs to be based on whether or not we believe the visual amenity is impacted to such a negative extent that the antenna is not permitted. The report makes it clear that the design principles of the R-codes say that the antennas, satellite dishes, etc., should not be visible from the primary and secondary street. And the report also, our officers have then responded to say that it's considered that the antenna doesn't present a significant or obtrusive impact when viewed from the street, but that there is, they believe, a tangible impact to the neighbours. I mean, it's important for us to be pragmatic, and obviously if the R-codes are saying it shouldn't be visible from the street, we should expect that it shouldn't have a hugely obtrusive and negative impact for neighbours. But I am of the belief that this antenna doesn't. I hope, as Councillor Sullivan puts it, and as yourself, Ms. Tanner, put, that perhaps there are some other options for how we can beautify it slightly. But I am happy to support this and to say that I don't think the antenna proves such a negative and obtrusive visual amenity impact that it can't be allowed, and I'm happy to support the alternative motion.
Thank you. Any other comments on the alternative motion before us? Councillor Slaughter.
I just have a quick clarifying question. What we're being asked in this proposed alternative motion, therefore, is to approval to keep the current antenna and not make the changes that you proposed. And I haven't finished the question. And then to await further plans, whether they come to fruition or not, it will come down in 3 years from the date of that decision. That's the current one would come down.
We'll have staff answer that
Is
question.
that actually what we're saying?
Mr. Hanna, we're in debate, so we can't engage back and forth with some. I apologize. And
So through the chair, the temporary approval, what it serves to do is to make sure that if there are no changes made, it comes down. If Mr. Hanna decides to make some substantial changes, he might need to lodge a variation just to give us the new design, and we can probably take the time-limited approval away. But this just puts that protection in place to go, look, if there's nothing that can be done, then maybe the whole thing needs to come down.
Thank you.
are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll put the alternative recommendation for a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. There you go. That's a decision tonight. All right, next we have a speaker, Steve Burnell, on item 6. And I'll just remind you, Mr. Burnell, when the alarm sounds, that's 3 minutes. And if you hear that, if you don't mind getting to your concluding remarks, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. So yes, I'm Simon Burnell. I'm from CLE Town Planning and Design, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the two landowners who collectively own numbers 2 to 8 Harvest Road in North Fremantle. We're speaking in support of the proposed scheme amendment 74 and the city's recommendation to initiate the amendment. We'd firstly just like to thank the staff for several years of consultation with our team and DPLH to enable progression of planning over this site and to achieve a viable zoning and density that will also enable upgrade to the city's adjacent asset, the Northern Laneway. The site is located just to the south of the North Fremantle Bowling Club and Community Hall, and this rezoning presents significant opportunity to revitalise this prominent site and the connection to the community facilities. Given the heritage significance of the surrounding community, this also presents one of the limited opportunities for development in the area, which is unconstrained by direct heritage status. This site also has no direct residential neighbours, making it ideal to limit the impacts of any redevelopment. Our amendment proposes a density coding of R160 that reflects the opportunity of the location, the accessibility to existing services, amenities, as well as public transportation. The intent is to provide a diversity of housing and a selection of land uses that will benefit local residents, particularly those on the eastern side of Stirling Highway. State planning frameworks and the city's draft local planning strategy both identify the need and opportunity for infill in locations such as this, and the proposed site falling within the identified North Fremantle District Centre maintains alignment with these intentions at a local level. This scheme amendment will provide the necessary framework for a future development application. There are a range of site-specific factors, constraints, and amendment obligations that will need to be addressed through a future development application, which may be by us or others. And it's important that there is flexibility for the future developer to address any constraints at the time. The city's officers have proposed to limit the development to 4 stories with a density coding of R100, whilst we have proposed R160 with development to be in accordance with the R codes. Our approach is largely consistent with a broader review of planning frameworks within North Fremantle along Stirling Highway. Our approach will allow for the greater provision of housing to meet infill targets and provides flexibility in built form to deal with site constraints. The officer's report identifies consideration for the retention of 2 significant trees, which, for example, this constraint amongst a suite of other considerations may heavily influence design outcomes in parts of the site. I'll wrap up. Reallocation of plot ratio, area and height, and addressing constraints such as trees, interface to the laneway, Stirling Highway, for example, will need to be addressed and flexibility will be needed. Limitations to height do not always guarantee a better built form outcome when considering all relevant considerations. The city also has an established and very robust design advisory committee which provides a pathway for design matters to be dealt with at the DA stage once the framework has been set through this process. We therefore suggest that placing a restriction on height and limiting density to R100 at this point in time is premature, given the opportunity that this site presents for not only the community, but also City of Fremantle assets. So thanks for your time and happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Burnell. Are there any questions from elected members? Seeing none, appreciate your comments. Thank you. Just noting that there is a proposed amendment for this item. Can I ask someone to move this item? Item 6, moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Sullivan, did you wish to speak to the item?
Thank you. The sites like these are really hard to get developments up and running. Obviously, it is in a prime location, and I think there would be no one that would think it's not a development site. To get a development on that site, an owner has to first amalgamate all the bits of land. That in itself is an incredible challenge, and often doesn't eventuate. Someone right in the middle always holds out. They have been able to amalgamate this site, and then following doing that, came to the city to suggest that it is a great site for a redevelopment, and I guess that's what we're here tonight to discuss. The site, in many ways, in terms of potential impact on neighbours, I mean direct impact, it's very well set because to its south is a lot of road reserve and car parking of previously developed sites, and a fairly wide road. To its north, obviously, is community facilities, which aren't likely to be overly impacted by development. And obviously to the west is a town centre, which doesn't have a lot of residential in it, and would certainly benefit from more diverse development around it, particularly development that provides different types of accommodation around the town centre rather than just the traditional family capable housing that you see in North Fremantle. Provides smaller units and diversity of accommodation types and probably affordability compared to the price of a North Fremantle house, I should say. So I think, we would all agree that it's a great site for redevelopment. The issue in front of us is whether it should be R100 or R160. And that issue is not, in my view, really the main issue. The main issues are what is the right form, built form, scale, height, configuration of accommodation, or building that should go on that site. And I don't think that's a single question. It's certainly not a single answer, because what might be appropriate on Stirling Highway could be quite different to what might be appropriate up on the corner of Harvest Road and Thompson Road, which would be directly over the road from Heritage Buildings. So we do have a complex site in terms of the built form. I don't think that necessitates, though, that we limit the amount of floor area that the overall development could be. Because the difference between an R100 and an R160 is the plot ratio. And the plot ratio for an R100 is 1.3 times the size of the site. That's how many square metres of floor space they could build. And the plot ratio for R160 is 2.0, meaning they can, obviously build a greater square meterage of building, and therefore more units and potentially more commercial and the like. I think the site can absolutely handle a plot ratio of 2.0. The issue is going to be, where should height be constrained? Where does it not matter that much? But also, what does the built form need to look like at the different perspectives of the site? As you go around, and what we would want, obviously, to see that graduation of scale and the graduation of the fenestration and the articulation of the building as it wraps around the corner into the old part of the town area. There are also those issues of the trees. I think at the absolute least, the one on the corner isn't like a mandatory keep it, not just for the fact that it is a regulated tree, but because it will very much mitigate many of the concerns about scale that might be perceived from further up Harvest Road or further up Thompson Road, because the tree is such a landmark, and it's probably a lot taller than 4 stories, I would hasten to add. So on that basis, I would like to move the amendment that's in the additional documents, and hope that I get a seconder.
Is there anyone to second the proposed amendment? Councillor Williamson Wong. Now, we've spoken on the item, now you're speaking on the amendment. Okay.
Yeah, and I will speak, and I know that I've said to my colleagues that I have also flagged deferring this, and so that still remains my intent. But I did want this amendment tabled, because it's important that the community can see where certainly I would like to head, and I would hope other elected members might speak to it as to whether at this stage they support the idea or have doubt about the idea. I think that's going to be very helpful to the process. But for my way of thinking, most of the concerns that I believe would be there in the community are actually very well handled in a local planning policy. They are the sort of things that can be dealt with in greater detail through a policy, but also can set kind of like the principles of what it is that we as a community would be hoping to see in that area. And then if the developer proposes something different, you already have a set of principles or criteria which to assess that against. As the applicant said, we also have a design advisory committee. They would then also have that guidance, if you like, as to what we and also the community felt were the right opportunities and constraints for that site. And they could speak to those through that design advice process, but also the developer would have that as well. If we just go to R100, we won't have a policy, we won't actually set anything in play, and it will be essentially up to the applicant to come forward with something and then for us to judge it. The reason I think it's important that we consider going to a deferral, because I won't speak to the deferral when I move it, is that this is effectively a really important issue for a North Fremantle community. They've had a lot of development over the years and are a little bit prickly and sensitive, and justifiably so probably, and it would be appropriate for this to be put on the table for a few weeks, so that it's not seen to be something that was done in an untoward or unconsultative sort of manner. So I'll be interested to hear what others think about the approach.
Wonderful, and I'll just remind elected members we're in debate on this amendment, and when this is done, then we'll move back to the substantive item itself. So we're just discussing the amendment before us, but Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the amendment, but I would support a deferral. Firstly, I just want to thank the city and the proponent for being very patient with the city. For being very patient with this process. I really do appreciate that officers and the landowners got to an agreed point to progress this beyond the limitation that was put on that laneway having to be upgraded before they progress this. So I'm grateful for everyone working positively together to progress this proposal, and there's an agreement there, which is great, because, yeah, I did think that was a bit onerous, without the landowner having some sort of certainty around what the development potential, not wanting to sort of outlay money with that. So thank you. And thank you for speaking tonight. They did provide some clarity, and I do agree. Look, in principle, I don't, or certainly not even in principle, I don't object to heights, but I just think and do agree with what you said, limiting heights doesn't mean a development outcome, absolutely 100%. So, but I think it's really important that when we allow for heights, and this is R160s as far as you go without going to the RACO and beyond, I think it's important that we have a framework in place that ensures we get a good development outcome from this site. My concerns with the proposal at R160 are it's a lot for the site. The context, the surrounding area is R25. I appreciate the location. It's on a highway. It's near the town centre, which can justify increased density and height and all the good things. But it's a big jump. And I do appreciate generally the officer's recommendation for R100. I generally support that. I think it does give us a bit more leverage when you come forward with your development applications. Just having that lower height limit, and I don't see it as a significant. I understand the plot ratio argument as well. I am on the fence, which is why I would support a little on this. So I would support a deferral. Not ready to support an R160 at this stage, and just give us the opportunity. There will be a lot of concern in the community. I think this one, there's not awareness. Potentially this item was on the agenda tonight. I understand the part of the process. It will go out for advertising and everyone will see it before it's initiated. But I also know that generally when a scheme amendment progresses, it's like the horse is bolted. So if you put in R160 now, it's very hard to pull it back. So it's, Anyway, that's enough from me. That's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. And I'll just flag for elected members, if a deferral is moved during debate of the amendment, it actually applies to the substantive motion, and this would just kind of fall by the wayside. So deferral can be moved at any time during debate. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thanks. A question for staff to start with, please. The question is, could you please, I guess, somewhat succinctly, but it's planning, so I'm sure it will take a while, explain how the R100 versus R160 decision is made, in terms of, it's my understanding that it's based on what our officers believe matches the locality and the character of the surrounding areas, but also taking into consideration our strategic planning as a city. Is that right? Through the chair, you've effectively explained our decision-making process. Obviously, the applicant has made their own assessment on what they believe fits the context of the area, and there are infill density goals
that aren't anywhere near as high as R160 for this site. But yes, looking at the heritage area, the context, the existing and the future, it's a big and difficult exercise, particularly when you're only looking at a number on a page as opposed to an actual development proposal.
All right, thank you. And yes, also thanks to staff for putting together the 3D modelling. I think it's very helpful for us to see, because you're right, sometimes it's hard to, I mean, R100 at 1.3 versus an R160 at 2.0 is kind of hard to comprehend unless we have the imagery. I'm going to take the chance now to talk about the amendment, because I agree with Councillor Sullivan, which is why I was happy to second it. I think the applicant can have a view and staff, officers can have a view, but as a council, we also, this is why it comes to us, we get to have an opportunity to consider whether or not we agree. And of course, we need to make sure that development matches the surrounding character and the locality, but we are also the kind of strategic setting section of local government, and a big part of our strategy as a city is to have good infill, and that does mean that we are utilising the sites that are best placed to take the most amount of people and the highest density to their best possible outcome, and this site is a perfect example of that. I think that it also would allow, I mean, we can't speak to what would be developed on here, but the more homes that we can allow for in our city, I think is going to be a win. And I do believe that an R160 this site is absolutely capable of. In terms of creating infill, I think I was just writing down some notes as I was listening in terms of the trees and the trade-off of an R100 versus an R160. I mean, my point would be that as a city, our strategic intent, of course, is to maximise our own urban canopy, but we are also not, I guess, blind to think that urban canopy stops at the borders of the city of Fremantle. And whilst we might lose 2 trees on this site, the more housing we can incentivise in our city means that there will be hopefully less environmental destruction elsewhere. So I do think we should keep that in mind. And the other trade-off, I think, which Councillor Sullivan and I might not necessarily agree on, is that a local planning policy is just a due regard document. We know that state government are taking away powers from local governments. To put something in our scheme does give it a bit of a it sets an expectation, but it also sets a clear guardrail that we're not going to accept a certain height. And so it is important to distinguish between the 2 different types of documents and the ways that we set that expectation. I'm quite comfortable to set an expectation or the guardrail of an R160, but I also think that this is a big decision, and I know it's highly frustrating for the applicant if we defer it again, and it's been ongoing, but I guess I'm personally comfortable with supporting the amendment as it is, and to support an R160 knowing that it's going out for advertisement, not that and not for final endorsement. So those are my thoughts on this, but I will end with a question just to be annoying, but I'll count it as 2 things. And the question is, if we were to defer it, we have an upcoming planning framework committee. Given the, my sense would be that perhaps elected members are just seeking a bit more time to go through this properly and not just make a decision right now. Would it be possible to add it as a late item for the planning framework committee, which is scheduled for the 13th of April, so quite soon, to continue, and then understanding that it would then have to come back to a council meeting for a decision, but to allow elected members on that committee to have a look at it?
Through the chair, yes, it would be possible. You may just find you have limited officer comment added, but we can absolutely, the committee is a committee and not a decision maker, so it would need to come back to council, so that may be the forum to discuss further.
Are there any other comments or questions on the amendment before us? Did you wish to close on the amendment, Councillor Sullivan?
Ask a question before I actually move a deferral. I was thinking of having it deferred to the next meeting, but the suggestion was that perhaps it should be deferred to the first meeting in May, so that it could go, or at least be discussed at the planning thing. Or should it be, would that be an item that should even be considered by that committee? Or should it be like an informal element? So we have an opportunity to refer it to the committee or defer it to council in a month. Perhaps.
So the intention of the committee is to focus on the new scheme, but then also look at JDAP decisions and how they, and come back and as deemed appropriate. We could probably squeeze this in if that's the mood of the chamber under the terms of reference as something to discuss. But personally, I would like to keep that committee focused on our new schemes. That way we're doing that, because if we're getting bogged down in other items, it may take away from that work, because that's going to be a lot of work. But again, it's a decision of the chamber. But did you want to add something to that, Russell?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I was thinking along the same lines. We don't really want the new committee that hasn't even met yet to get sort of bogged down with applications, which this is, and negotiating with people putting in applications for actual developments. It is about that broader piece of framework. The agenda for Monday is already looking very full, and I think if this is deferred for conversation, it needs a full conversation, and probably the right forum to do so.
That answer your question?
It sort of does. Look, on that basis, I will move a deferral to the first council meeting in May to allow the potential amendments to be, to sit on the table for that period.
Is there a seconder for the deferral? Councillor Kamano? Great. Did you wish to speak on the deferral?
Only that because I kind of like wrote down some things that would have been relevant to a closing. The thing that if you're in doubt, I guess, about where this process heads, I want to kind of like emphasise that my way of understanding the process, if we were to approve the R160 with a policy to be written, would be that the process would very much be one where you would work with the community to try and develop up a planning policy that we were all comfortable with, and went through that process of basically the horse trading between, okay, if we have it low here, we can put it up here, and rather. And if you get to the end of that process and you have kind of a consensus, or the council supports a policy, then you've done the hard work and you've got a great outcome. And if you don't get to that moment because everyone is so outraged, then that's the time to amend the amendment, or basically when it comes back out of the process to say, community said very strongly that we don't want that. So, I think it's a process that really thrashes it out. And what I like about that is it thrashes it out before the development application comes in. And in my experience, when that has happened at Leighton Beach, when the community thrashes something out in great detail, when the applications eventually come along, no one comes along to council to talk about them, because it's already been kind of like pre-agreed in a sense. So I like that process, and that's what this process would deliver. But I think it's worth letting the community know about this, so that if that's completely outrageous for the community, at least they have a chance to come along in a month's time and express that point of view. And I don't want to be accused of, sneaking this through the back door. So that's why I would like to move that deferral.
Did you wish to speak on the deferral, Councillor Kamado? No? All right, we'll put the deferral of item 6 in its entirety up for a vote. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Looks like you got a little more time. Not sure that's what you wanted, but that's what we decided. Great, and I just want to thank Nicole Caesar, who's been very patient, who's here to speak on the next item, item 7. Just like everyone else, there'll be an alarm that sounds after 3 minutes, so if you don't mind concluding your comments, but thank you for being so patient.
Sorry, I didn't realise I'd be speaking tonight. Can you hear? I came into the library this morning and the librarian helped me fill in the PDF because I'm a computer illiterate. And so I didn't realise that I would be speaking. I'll do my best and make, and I'm very nervous because I've never spoken to this many people before in my life. I live on my own. I'm a pensioner living in beautiful White Gum Valley, and I love my garden and I have lots and lots of trees. And I became aware that my lemon-scented gum in the back corner maybe was going to be under threat from neighbours. And I mentioned it to them because they'd complained about the leaves on their extension roof. And I said, oh, look, I've put a nomination in for it to be put on the significant tree register. I think that's what it's called. And she just walked away. And 3 days later, I came home and there was a guy with a chainsaw up the tree and he'd taken all the lower branches away, 9 of them, and there was nothing I could do. And then November just this last year, the council very kindly sent around 2 assessors to look at the tree, and it's 15 metres and it's just magnificent. And I've been in my house for 12 years and it's never dropped a branch. It's never dropped, there's no dead branches on it. And but the other neighbour, so that was the back neighbour, then the side neighbour wanted to build a very solid modular fence, which actually turned out higher than the council regulations, but there. But I said, to do that, you can't touch the roots because it was right in the corner, right? And he assured me he wouldn't. The assessor, Nathan Blumenthal, who came round with his assistant, they took all the photos and everything. And he said, I tell your neighbours before they have any work done to get an arborist to assess where the roots are so that they're not going to be damaged. They refused and the work started. And I said to my next door neighbour, you promise they won't touch the roots of the corner. He said, oh no, they're not going to do that. And then 4 days later, I came out and there was a guy with a saw and a power saw, and he'd sawn 3 of the roots below the ground of this poor tree that, and so that's why I've applied for it to be put on not just I know the Fremantle has a canopy protection now, but I would really like it to be put on the register formally so that these neighbours can be notified formally, if that makes sense.
That it does. Thank you so much for your comments. Are there any questions of, no questions? Okay, so we are now on the significant tree nominations and the local planning policy, the tree canopy policy. The 2 items combined. Can I ask someone to move the item 7? Councillor Williamson-Wong, seconded by Councillor Clark. I'll just note there are 2 proposed amendments on this item that anyone is welcome to move, even though they were put in under my name. Did you wish to open debate, Councillor Williamson-Wong?
Thanks. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us, Nicole. I hope we're not too scary. I tried to smile the whole time. I am happy to see this come to us and for us to look at the amendments to the local planning policy 2.23, and also the nominations for the significant tree register. I think that there was a great summary from officers in the report that the application of the policy, which was clearly set out for us in terms of the actions that have been taken since the policy was introduced, demonstrate that our policy is successfully protecting and enhancing tree canopy within Fremantle, and that's a massive win. I mean, we heard earlier tonight about potentially ways that we just are working out some quirks of the system and how that will go, but for the most part, this policy has been embraced by Fremantle community members, and I think that's really great to see. I also think that including R40 properties is really important, and I will just speak briefly. I think my comments before probably indicated my position, but I am quite comfortable with us not having the this regulated tree policy apply to every single property in the city of Fremantle, because I think that, I mean, it's important for us to have good urban canopy. I'm obviously a big supporter of that, but we also have to be pragmatic about what that looks like and how onerous it becomes when we are perhaps asking people who have higher zoned properties to be replanting twice as many trees as they might apply to remove. And I know staff had mentioned this to us, but I guess to reiterate, when perhaps development is of such a density that the site means you can't plant things on there, there are then problems about where trees are potentially planted, who looks after them, who, you know, is responsible for their maintenance, etc., etc. And so I think covering including R40 is a great step, and the map in the report was very helpful in demonstrating that. It is the vast majority of property, and especially the vast majority of, areas that we want good urban canopy to be in. And I'm sure Councillor Sullivan will also talk about it, but the placement of trees in our city centre and the higher density zoned properties, etc., is also important. We need to make sure that, you know, and if Councillor Graham was here, he would talk about choosing good trees for the, you know, the right trees for the sites, and I think that's also important. And though tree placement in those areas needs to be done, I guess, with intention, and so I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation as it stands in that regard. I also think that I'll ask a question of staff in a second, but that I would prefer to see us, I guess, finalise the local planning policies and then come back to consider the trees being put specifically on a tree register, because I am of the view that that there's a minimal difference between the two in the outcome of a protection of a tree. So I guess the question to officers is, if a tree is a regulated tree under our local planning policy and it's on the significant tree register versus a tree that is not on the tree register but is regulated, is the process any different for an application to remove the tree?
Through the chair, no. So the main difference between the two is really the reasons for them being protected. So the significant tree register brings in some additional criteria about heritage and cultural reasons for that tree maybe being significant, whereas the regulated tree is really about the species and the type and size of the tree, and just puts a blanket protection over them. But in terms of removal, the same process for a development application applies.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that same topic? So if someone's proposing to do works in a neighboring property, so it doesn't have a significant tree, as was pointed out to us tonight, obviously they're not removing a tree, they're doing works, so the policy would not apply to that person. But let's say those works may have an impact on the root system or the branches of a tree that are overhanging for whatever reason. If it's on the significant tree register, would they need to seek those, apply for those works in a different manner, so that way the tree was going to be protected if it's on the significant tree register versus if it's just a regulated tree?
Through the chair, no. So the policies talk about things like maintenance pruning. So there is exemptions if you are genuinely just taking away minimal amounts to keep it neat and tidy. It also talks about tree damaging activity. So if you're undertaking activity to a tree, whether it's big roots that cause that tree to then die, it's the same provisions. It doesn't matter if that tree is on your site or not. If that tree is covered by protection and those roots, by cutting through those roots or removing large limbs, cause significant damage to that tree and it meets the definition of tree damaging activity, there are consequences to that. Compliance activity is obviously complicated and it is not perfect, but those provisions are the same. Well, I guess I'll finish my open now because that was a question. Thanks. Thanks for the clarification from staff. I guess my point being that, well, in my opinion, it's still important for us to have a significant tree register because it is providing a different purpose, which is what the manager pointed out in terms of it allows protection for trees for heritage or cultural reasons. And as a council, I mean, I still think that that might have some merit, but I don't think that there is any sense in us creating a double up of policy or a register of 2 trees and that creating, I guess, kind of complications or confusion for anyone down the line. And it sounds silly to say that a tree that might be on a register and is also regulated might then confuse someone, but we know that confusion can happen to anyone all the time. So for simplicity's sake and to make it very clear, I think I'm comfortable with the officer's recommendation, and I hope that perhaps staff can follow up with Nicole in terms of the tree damaging activities that seem to be going on, because this is unfortunately a good example of how we need to make sure our policy is also applying to neighbour interactions. And if a tree not on your property, if a tree on your property is being damaged by a neighbour, then I guess this is similar to the item previously, a way that we can test the policy and ensure that our community knows action and compliance can be taken against that person. So I hope you all support the officer's recommendation.
I'll just I'll just move the First Amendment to add the other trees to the significant tree list after that. If there's a seconder for that, the amendment to add all the trees that were put on before us to the significant tree register. Seconded by Councillor Slaughter. I mean, this is pretty straightforward, so I won't go on and on about it. The reason why I think it's important that we do this is because there is a little bit of more, I guess, awareness of trees on the significant tree register, but also because people have nominated these trees. We have a pretty onerous process to add a tree to the significant tree register. The landowner has to nominate it, and each one of these trees has been nominated by someone who really cares about those trees on their own property. And to say that we just shouldn't put them on there, I think, is because it might be covered by a policy. That is a view, but we all know that our policy changes all the time, and we will be amending the policy later tonight in one way, shape, or fashion after this vote. So I really believe that if people want to take the time and the effort to add their tree to the list and it meets the criteria, then that we should allow that to happen. So I put this before us just to add the trees, because obviously the lady here earlier tonight, Nicole, really cares about the tree that's on her property and would like to see it last a long time. Like I said earlier, just to repeat myself, if the policy ever changes, a different council is elected, then that list will still be there as well. So just want to put that forward and up for discussion. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I guess I have mixed views about this. I very much appreciate the passion of people who want their tree to be recognised, and I certainly do not want to do anything to discourage that. In fact, one of the trees that's actually on the significant tree register is a tree that a friend of mine has in the back of his Douglas Street property, and fought extremely hard to get it up onto the list. And it is a great tree, and he built his development around it, and would be mortified if anyone was to chop it down after he's not there, or damage it while he was there. So I do get it, but I think, as has been clearly said, the regulated tree approach basically provides the same protection, as far as I can tell. Perhaps that needs to be promoted more. Perhaps we need to ensure that people are aware that just because a tree isn't on their property, they can't go around hacking at it. My neighbours have all loved the idea of pruning my trees from their side and the like. And while that might be acceptable to some degree of tree maintenance, if it were to damage the tree to the extent that it would die, or to the extent, like cutting the roots, to the extent that then causes dieback of the tree, and you start seeing limbs coming down like the previous item tonight, then obviously that is a significant damage to that tree. But that can be handled under the regulated tree process. I guess where my frustration lies is that the significant tree register was very much put in place to cover those trees which are culturally significant, and have been through a heritage assessment process, and need to be on a list somewhere, so that they are given protection in the planning system, even though they sort of have protection through the heritage system. They don't have protection in the planning system, as we know, and that's what the significant tree register does. What worries me a little bit as well is that by conflating that register with other trees which people basically just love, as opposed to being necessarily culturally significant, it does potentially undermine a little bit the purpose of the heritage trees, but it also might create sort of misunderstanding that, oh, well, your tree is only a regulated tree, but it's not on the significant tree register, so it's of a lesser standard. It almost creates this double tier sense, and it would be confusing. And so I would prefer the significant tree register to go back to being heritage trees, effectively, and for all other trees to simply be identified as regulated trees, and that we deal with it that way. I would also highlight that the experience of Nedlands, who were one of the first councils to put in place tree protection many decades ago, was that it actually can cause the complete opposite of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because as soon as some people hear that you're going to nominate a tree, the very thing that has happened in this case starts to happen, and people panic. And they'll go and poison your tree. I've got trees in my street which have been poisoned, and the like, or cut the roots, or sneak over the fence, or do something that makes the tree unviable. And so, yeah, putting it or nominating a tree can actually be fraught with the complete opposite consequence of what the person nominating it is trying to achieve. So as such, part of me wants to just go, oh look, just let it go and chuck these on there, and don't worry about it. But frankly, I think we should not have these trees on a register like this, and separate that out. So I won't support the amendment.
Yep. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thanks. I'm not going to rehash much of what Councillor Sullivan said, just to say that I think he put it very well, that the significant tree register serves an important purpose, and that purpose is different to our local planning policy. And from a governance and kind of policy perspective, we need to be clear and create good policy. That's our role as a council, and the significant tree register is important for planning you know, to make sure we can protect trees that are culturally significant and significant for heritage reasons. Our local planning policy protects trees that we all love and that people are very passionate about protecting on their own property. And I also agree with Councillor Sullivan. I think I have an uncomfortability with the idea that we will let some trees that have are dearly beloved and have ecological value, etc., onto a register, in that it implies that there's a weird hierarchy going on. And I think we just need to be clear that we, as a council, also we are making a decision that we want all of those trees to be protected. That's not to say that I don't commend people who take really good care of their trees, and wouldn't it be amazing to be able to celebrate that in different ways, the people who've embraced building around trees or planting more trees on their property, etc. But I'm not sure that it's done in the significant tree register, which exists for the cultural and heritage reasons. And I also guess note that, I mean, people can amend policy, as Mayor Lorver says. We could amend the local planning policy, we're going to. People can also delete the tree register if they wanted to. I mean, it has the same weight. So again, there's no hierarchy here. They're the same. In my view, they serve different purposes, and we should be clear about their different purposes.
Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I seconded this amendment because looking at the reasons given for the statement of significance of the proposed trees, I saw perhaps not as much detail as I wanted, and what would be provided if it were a report brought back to council later. However, a lot of work has been done on investigating these particular trees, and some of the statements of significance are the same as other trees that already exist on the register as it stands. So before we make any changes to it. So for that reason, I thought that this amendment actually had some good legs, being that the work has significantly been done, perhaps not to the detail that people would like to prove the cultural and heritage value of these proposed 4 trees in front of us, but I believe it has, and we have statements of significance in front of us to show that.
Any other comments on the amendment, proposed amendment? Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you, and thank you, Nicole, for coming this evening. It's great to hear from you and your tree, and to hear your experience. I'm really, really sorry that you went through that, and yeah, I hope that the city officers, please reach out, the city officers, or they'll reach out to you or through us if you have any more issues come up with the neighbours with that tree, and we'll be happy to assist and provide advice. And personally, yeah, it's a beautiful tree, and I think, yeah, it's definitely significant, and we'd want to see that saved. I love those trees, and I do think when people buy a property with that tree there, I'm sure it's been very, very big for a long time. I don't know how long the neighbours have been there, and appreciate they get bigger and the risk increases and what have you, the impacts are greater, but they do buy a property and the tree's there, and often it can, yeah, help to sell a property. It is a beautiful tree. I don't object to that. However, with the amendment, I won't be supporting the amendment. I do agree with the officers reporting that I do think that the local policies should be advertised first before we add to the register. And thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for his input tonight and the take on what the significant tree register should be with the cultural heritage significance. I think that's important, and our and we have other mechanisms to protect this tree. Yeah, I'm not sure on the process when neighbours do things like this, and it's interesting to hear the experience of Nedlands, that perhaps this proposal can trigger bad behaviour from neighbours, which is just appalling. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm sure the city will do what they can to support you and support keeping this tree, and liaise with neighbours if necessary. So, but yeah, won't be supporting the amendment for the reasons in the office. I'll support the officer's recommendation on this one. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll just briefly close on the amendment just to address a couple of the things. So yes, policies are policies, we can change those, but also we do have a state government likes to get involved with local planning decisions and our local planning policies. So some of the changes might not be of our choosing, that we don't know what that might be in the future. And the state government actually put local governments down the path of the significant tree register prior to this as the way to protect trees, and obviously it hasn't been very successful. But for me, it comes down to the people and the process that to nominate a tree is very, very thorough. We had 7 nominations, and after the city staff reached out to everyone that nominated a tree and talked to them about our current policy and how it might protect their tree and how with the significant tree register, 3 of those nominations were withdrawn and 4 chose to continue going forward. So that's why I've been putting this forward, because as Councillor Slaughter pointed out, the statements of significance are very, very similar, if not the same, to the current trees that are on our list. So, but whether or not this gets up or not, I think we can all agree that after tonight, trees will still be protected in our city, one way or the other. So, that being said, I will put the amendment up for a vote. All those in favor? All those against? And that is lost. Lawver and Slaughter in favor. Van Dorsen, Clark, Sullivan, Williamson, Wong, and Kamada against. Now we're back to the substantive item as originally put. And Councillor Williamson, Wong, you moved it and spoke to it, so we're in discussion about the item as put. Just kind of let debate happen. I mean, there's been some discussion about it applying to the whole city or not, but anyone's free to move any amendment at any time. I figured I would wait to hear the next one before I would put it forward. Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I'm glad that we are talking about trees so much tonight, and I think it's a really good time to do it, being the first reiteration of this policy, to really look at what the outcomes have been, and we can see, as Councillor Williamson-Wong said, there's been a lot of positives that we can draw from it, but I would also remind the chamber that there have been numerous adverse events as well. Neighbours not taking care and not being considerate of each other, which we can't influence through this policy. There's no enforcement written into the policy. There's no real teeth right here insofar as the enforcement of my neighbour is chopping a limb off my tree that happens to reach over their boundary, perhaps that's within their remit as a neighbour, but it's not reflected in this particular policy. And I think we are getting a more mature canopy over time, and we're going to have more and more of these conflicts. And I think that we need to acknowledge that as part of discussing this particular policy, so that we know where it's going to lead, and we don't have questions like tonight with, well, what next? As far as when we're looking at retrospective approvals in particular, but also the enforcement thereof of the policy. So that is my thoughts.
Thank you. I assume you have a question,
Yes,
Councillor
I
Williamson-Wong?
do.
Thank you.
Thanks. I guess that's an important point raised by Councillor Slaughter, and having sat through the start of this policy, I guess my understanding is that enforcement happens under the Planning Development Act. But the question to staff is, can you please explain how enforcement works, and is there a way for us to better connect situations like this to that enforcement because I do think that it is connected in here. It would be an unauthorised development and dealt with as such, but perhaps there's a missing communication link. And so could staff please explain that?
Through the chair, there's possibly different ways to look at enforcement. There's very black and white ways that are obviously written into the Planning Development Act. There's consequences when people don't comply with policies or don't apply for planning applications, regardless of what you're doing. I think possibly what Councillor Slaughter is referring to is that ongoing monitoring, checking up, the ability for people to get immediate responses to things. We are working with our compliance team, so the planning team, compliance team and our parks team all work together to try and respond to those the best we can, but we just don't have the resources to drive suburb by suburb checking and you know, monitoring tree lopping companies and things. So there is an element of maybe some more education that needs to occur, some more information. These policies are more and more common across local governments, so it's becoming more and more accepted that this might come up when people are developing, particularly with home building companies and things. We've got duty planner rosters, our compliance team head out when complaints are received. We sort of do it in a timely way as we can, effectively. So there isn't just that, I guess, ongoing monitoring that we can do, but we can be responsive to complaints and act when people are undertaking works without approval.
Great, thank you. I may just say a couple comments on the substantive item, if I'm allowed to be a little indulgent, because it was a little over 4 years ago when I was first elected as a councillor, and one of the biggest things that I wanted to get done was protect tree canopy, and our community wanted to protect tree canopy. And immediately after that election, some elected members actually left. They said, Ben, we're never going to do it because whatever reasons. And I said, okay. But we worked at it. We spent 2 years developing a notice of motion that went to this chamber where we had lots of different ideas on how to best protect tree canopy. That came from our community, it came from experts, it came from attending conferences. And then shortly after that, this chamber voted in our tree protection policy to cover R25 and properties below and industrial areas. And as we can see in the report that was provided to us, it has been protecting trees. It's not without its problems, of course, because it's a new policy and people are still learning. But while I would love to see this apply everywhere across Fremantle, because I think it's a little bit easier to understand, I don't believe in large sites that it would stop development. And we have the example immediately before this where we have a site that has regulated trees on it, that if it is changed to R100 and R160 or anything above R40, those trees will no longer be regulated and protected. And it's not saying that development couldn't happen on that site, that they would just have to provide the responses as per the policy. And word is getting out. I would just like to say, someone called me the other day about wanting to remove a pretty big tree on the front of their garden, and they had rang 3 different companies, and each one said, no, you need to get an approval. You live in Fremantle. And so they were ringing me up saying, Ben, what can I do? And I said, well, talk to me. What's the deal? Turned out it was a palm tree. But palm trees are exempt, and they were overjoyed because they wanted to do a native garden, which was a wonderful outcome. But they were told no by 3 different companies because they were in Fremantle. So I will say that word is getting out. But again, from starting over 4.5 years ago, working with our community to getting a policy, West Before Us actually expands that policy further. So it's not like we're not taking steps in the right direction. So I'm happy with whatever this chamber decides, because no matter what, we will be protecting more trees than are currently protected, and we will be protecting our canopy. So I'll leave my comments at that, but thank everyone for their thoughtful additions to the debate. Are there no other comments? Seeing none. Jemima, would you like to close?
Thanks. I'll be brief. I think that the points you raise are important in terms of how we are taking steps to protect trees on more and more land as we go through. Perhaps this isn't the last iteration of this policy that we see. That would be my hope as we continue to work through the different things. I guess in terms of just why we are still leaving land out of the policy, for me, I guess I wanted to be clear to the chamber and to community members who might be watching or listening, etc., that I want to encourage trees to stay on those tricky development sites, but I do think that we haven't done enough work to figure out how we might do that, and putting the policy across all land in our local government area might not necessarily stop development, but I think it would likely have quite a big harm to our reputation as a city, which is something we should consider, but that we probably need to do a bit of work if we want to protect those trees, to whether or not there is something like a cash in lieu policy or something that allows people, if they're going to remove a tree from a property, to submit, to give money for urban canopy, because the problem I see on those sites is not that it would stop development completely or that there wouldn't be a way around, but that trees in those locations are difficult to deal with and to understand where they're best located. And so I guess hopefully the next iteration means that there's a solution that allows us to encourage those retention of those trees, but in a way that works with developers, so that we can have better outcomes. But as always, enjoyed talking about trees this evening.
And every meeting if we can. Seeing as we're now closed, we'll have the item as recommended by the officers. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Great. Okay. Seeing as we've gone through all the items where we had speakers, we're all the way back at item number 1. Everyone, that is the Amherst Street, the additions, alterations, and unauthorized change of use to industry and office. And I will just remind folks that we do have a proposed amendment for this. So can I ask someone to move the officer's recommendation? This is the Wabi Systems on Amherst Street. Oh, can I say their name? Okay. Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Kamada. Wish to open debate, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I consider this to be fairly straightforward. You've got a piece of land, I guess, that's somewhat stranded in between development phases, if you like, and it's been used. It's actually been used very intensively, which is great, and the sort of activity, I think, is helpful for Fremantle more generally, in terms of creating jobs and in terms of building the right sort of product that we'd like to see happening in Fremantle. The issue obviously is a matter of zoning that will take time to sort out. So I think it's appropriate to give a new period of time for this. My only concern is that the recommendation included a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Time limit. I understand that's what the applicant suggested they would be comfortable with, but that was following the fact that obviously people further down the street have made complaints about their activity and the like, and they thought presumably that this was, well, we'll just say what we need to say to get an approval. What I'm concerned about is by setting a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday limit, is that it kind of goes against the very basis for the redevelopment strategy that we have for the area over the road, which is very much one of a mixed-use environment, one of an environment where we will see creatives, we will see people making things, we will see people with music studios, we will see light industrial-like activities in this precinct. And to suggest that there won't be any noise or disturbance is probably sending the wrong message at this point in time. I think 7 a.m. is widely recognised as the start time for builders, and I don't see why it wouldn't also be a reasonable start time for any non-residential activity in this precinct. So 7 a.m. to 5 p.m, Monday to Friday, I'm not so worried about because presumably most builders don't work outside of those times, although I saw bricklayers laying bricks on Good Friday the other day. But, you know, the 7 a.m. is the one I'm worried about. What also worried me was that if you set an unrealistic time frame of 9 a.m. And they start regularly turning up at 7 a.m., we then have a massive compliance issue, which is unreasonable to expect our staff to have to deal with when reality is, you know, 7 a.m. Absolutely passes the pub test. 9 a.m. would be, are you kidding? So I'm going to move my amendment, if I can,
Do we have
for
some-
changing 9 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Seconded by Councillor Van Dorsen. Did you wish to
No,
speak?
I've already spoken way too much.
Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment changing the time? Councillor Van Dorsen.
Just briefly, thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for putting this forward. I absolutely 100% agree. The environmental noise protection regulations allow for 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, I think, typically. So I think, just agree with everything Councillor Sullivan has said. So 100% support this. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I completely agree as well with everything Councillor Sullivan brought forward on this one. There are other businesses in the area. There's a sawmill in that area that works from 7 to 7 every weekday. It's just part of living in that area. It is an industrial area that is slowly becoming more of a residential, but it's looking to embrace that industrial feel and function, and hopefully turn that, as mentioned, into an arts. And we do have music and all that sort of stuff in that area. So I'm wholeheartedly support the 7 a.m. amendment.
Seeing no more discussion, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favor of the amendment? It's unanimous. And we're back to the item as amended. Any further discussion? Did you wish to close, Councillor Sullivan? No? We'll put the amended item up for a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Right. Now, we're skipping 2 because we already have done that item. We're moving to item 3, which is Ellen Street. It's the Christian Brothers College, the electronic sign. Also note there is a alternate motion for this one, and either can be moved. Councillor Williamson Wong, I might need you to tell us which one you're going to move.
I'm going to move the officer's recommendation.
Is there a seconder for this?
Could fail. Could fail at the first
I'll
test.
I'll second it just for the purposes of debate.
All right, let's do this. I feel like it wasn't that long ago we were talking about another animated sign, but a much larger one up in O'Connor. And that was quite an animated discussion, but I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation on this. The reasons being that our policy is pretty clear that animated signs are discouraged in all zones, and I think that implies to me that we should be extra careful when we're talking about our city centre, and especially in heritage areas. We spoke at length in this chamber about allowing an animated sign in an industrial area. I understand that it's a much bigger one, but I guess the reason I raise that is that when I first saw this report, was my immediate thought, and the appetite then was that an animated sign wasn't appropriate even in a zone. I supported that sign, but I don't think that an animated sign is appropriate in our city centre zone. There have been questions about the heritage versus planning considerations. For me, I understand planning as the kind of umbrella. Heritage sits under that. It is a consideration, and while we have advice from Heritage Council and our internal teams that this wouldn't affect the heritage because it's not on the heritage buildings and could be removed, I do think that it is still inconsistent with the intent of this area, and as an animated sign, I just don't think that we want to see them in our city centre zone, and that it doesn't meet our intention for this area, and as such, I am urging other elected members to support the officer's recommendation, and I guess consider that if our policy is saying we don't support animated signs in any zone, then how do we, I guess, reconcile being very opposed to animated signs in industrial areas versus others? And I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation for those reasons.
Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Williamson-Wong. I think there are other alternatives that the applicant can use instead for their needs. Signs like this on schools do exist in the City of Fremantle, or either within their bounds or on their fence lines. But we have some signs that are still the letters that you would go off and put on each day to change your messaging if you needed to, which might be a little difficult at that height that they've proposed in this particular location. But I think that there are perfectly good alternatives to illuminated signs that this applicant could use instead. And so I too will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation as well. I find animated signs to be visual pollution, to be quite honest, unless they're artworks, of very clever artwork. But I feel that, as mentioned by Councillor Slaughter, they are at other schools. John Curtin's are within the bounds of the school, and they are highly visible to everybody still who's passing through the school and meet what they want it to meet its purpose. I just feel that we need to not start something in encouraging more and more electronic signs within the city.
Councillor Kamado.
Yeah, probably more of a question. If you look at the table, it's deemed to comply in all aspects other than size. So my question is, if the size was the same as Fremantle College, as an example, would this have been deemed to comply?
Through the chair, it's a little difficult for me to answer. I'm not entirely sure of the size of Fremantle College. The policy has set criteria, but also general provisions that need to apply. So those discussions about visual amenity and impact on heritage are more generalised criteria that also need to be tested. So it isn't just simply about the size and type of the sign, it's about how it fits in with its context.
Is there any other discussion on the officer recommendation? Councillor Sullivan.
I don't discount the fact that perhaps it could be not quite as big, but for me, the question really, this notion. I know when these policies sort of were coming in, is that we had policies that said you can't have flashing neon lights, you can't have movie kind of film-like screening and the like. But you can have a sign, and then you could have a sign that maybe had a light that allowed the sign to be read at night time, old school, and all of a sudden we have, lo and behold, technology advancement where such signs can be actually digitally produced. We don't have to rely on the old-fashioned triangulated element that would rotate and then rotate again and produce 3 different signs every 5 minutes. And yet we are seemingly trying to classify a sign that just uses technology that is kind of static and then changes after a minute and then is static, or 30 seconds, a static image and has its illumination from behind rather than from above, and doesn't need someone to get up on a stepladder and change the letters and change or paste up a new poster every 5 seconds, and we're sort of classifying that in the same way that we would do a neon sign. flashing all the time, or a movie projection or the like. And I just think that's not what that to me is not the policy intent. The policy intent was to try and deal with things which were like flashing in your face all the time and overly illuminated at night time and the like. That isn't this proposal. This proposal is for, I think it's finishing at 5 p.m. It's directly targeting people who use the school effectively to provide information to them in a useful medium. And that is why I would support it. If people are worried about the size of it, then I think, defer it and ask for it to be reduced would be a perfectly legitimate thing. But I do think it is a reasonable request to have. I don't think it's, letting the cat out of the bag. I don't think we're going to see a proliferation necessarily. We already have similar signs at schools throughout the city. So I'm not sure why this one in particular, if it's the size, deal with the size. But if it's only the size, I'm not sure why we would have allowed the other ones and not allow this one.
Look, I was really line ball on this, but I'm going to speak because I'm going to vote against the officer's recommendation and just give my reasons as our practice. I think what Councillor Sullivan has put forward as an alternate is perfectly reasonable in my view. The restrictions on the time from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., no moving images, 30-second static, images are all kind of what other schools do. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect the CBC to be able to do the same. There's the difference between this and the one on Stock Road also is there's no third-party advertising being proposed for this sign. That was a big thing for me on the Stock Road one because people are getting bombarded with commercial advertisements. This is for school functions only, and it is much, much, much smaller than the one that's out there on the corner of South Street and Stock Road. So for all of those reasons, I'll be voting to this one down and hopefully supporting the alternative recommendation. But I completely understand all the views of that councillors have expressed tonight. Is Councillor Van Dorsen as the last?
Yes, thank you. I'll be voting in alignment with Councillor Sullivan and the Mayor tonight. I won't be, I think this does warrant approval, and I think the alternative motion from Councillor Sullivan addresses everything that needs to be addressed. I think the key considerations with this, as mentioned by Councillor Kamada, it's largely compliant. When you look at the assessment table, it's complies. It's apart from, I think it was size or some very minor things, and it's supported by, I think another key consideration for me was the heritage impact, because there's beautiful heritage there with the CBC building. It's supported by the State Heritage Office. It's supported by our local heritage officers who I know to be very conservative in their assessment of impacts on heritage. And I believe that all the conditions of approval proposed in the alternate motion will address everything in terms of luminance and variables, content and what have you. If we get to that, is it possible if I have a question, sorry. If the proposed alternate motion does get up, can we amend conditions? I just note a big consideration for me is also third-party content, but there's no condition restricting third party, and that's something I'd like to see as an amendment to the,
If it's accepted by the mover and the seconder, things can be added to any.
Yeah, we can amend that alternate conditions. Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Did Councillor Williamson Wong, did you wish to close? Then we'll put the officer's recommendation to refuse the application up for a vote. All those in favor of refusing the sign? That's Councillor Slaughter, Councillor Clark, and Councillor Williamson Wong. All those against the officer's recommendation? Councillor Kamada. That's Van Dorsen, Councillor Sullivan, and myself. It's carried just. And we have an alternate recommendation. Would someone like to move? Move. Sorry, backwards, yes, sorry, that was lost. Yes, 4-3. Yeah, I'll get it right eventually. Don't you guys worry. All right, alternate recommendations proposed by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you. I won't say too much more. I'll just speak to, I guess, what Councillor Kamada raised as a question, and perhaps just seek further clarification. The section where it says it doesn't comply seems to be subjective rather than objective, in the sense that there's not a specific size that would comply. It's more about is it appropriate in its setting? Is that correct?
Simply, yes.
Okay. Look, I was thinking about deferring it to allow the size to come down if there was a particular size that it should be limited to. But when I look at it on that building, in terms of, it feels like there is an automatic frame to the sign. It fits very comfortably on the building. In its current size. I don't see that as being outrageously large in that context on that particular building. And I also think that, well, if it made it like half the size, it would probably actually look dicky to the extent of ridiculous. So part of me is going, no, it's fine as it is. So I would support it with this alternative recommendation.
Did you wish to comment, Councillor Van Dorsen?
Just to confirm my proposed amendment, which has been drafted by officers. Thank you very much. I don't think I need to speak on the item too much. I've already spoken on it, but is that confirming
acceptable
that's
by
part of?
Councillor Sullivan?
Perhaps if I can see it, and then I can agree.
Oh, that's it. Yes, it's in.
Oh, sorry. I just wonder if you mean third-party commercial advertisements. I mean,
Yes, that's what I mean.
Can we add the word commercial, and I'll accept it on that basis?
Do Van Dorsen second it? Does this need to vote? Is it accepted by?
If I accepted by the mover and the seconder.
Great, perfect. So we have an amended alternate recommendation before us. Is there any comments? Seeing none, did you wish to close, Councillor Sullivan? We'll put that item for a vote. All those in favour? And that's Councillor Kamada, Councillor Van Dorsen, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Lawver. All those against? Councillor Slaughter, Councillor Clark, and Councillor Williamson Wong. Now that item is carried. Okay. Are we ready for item 5, everybody? Okay, good, because we're going to debate the initiation of Scheme Amendment 89, which is about convenience stores. Would someone like to move that item? Councillor Slaughter, seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong. Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I am unchanged in my position from very few weeks ago when we all voted to put this forward and to go ahead and seek approval to first to advertise and then hopefully have this scheme amendment in place to limit where convenience stores can and cannot be by making them not just an approved use. So I agree with the officer's recommendation and would like to proceed.
Great. Any other comments on the item? Councillor Sullivan.
Look, I will support it. I had my reservations about whether, given the good work that the state government has done recently to certainly get us a little bit closer to better control over the problem, I felt that perhaps we could have more efficiently flicked this into the overall writing of the new town planning scheme. But on the basis of the officer advice that virtually all of the work to draft the scheme amendment is the majority of the work that the staff would have been doing anyway, I'm not going to stand in the way of just letting it continue along its merry path and see what happens.
Great, Councillor Clark.
Thanks. Yeah, we're now at 18. I know the report, I think it says 15 or 16, but we're at 18 at the moment for alleged con stores within the city. And I'm advised that some of them were raided last week or the week before prior. But I'm really looking forward to the laws being enacted so that new Superintendent Steve Post and his team can swing into action to not only start clearing them out and create some empty spaces for some new businesses to move in, but also very pleased that this, what we're putting forward here, will support all of that action. Can't come soon enough. Thanks. And thanks to the officers for their work on this. I know we distracted you.
Are there any other comments on the item? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of the officer's recommendation? Great, that is unanimous, and we will proceed with that work. Okay, we are now on item number 8, which is the adoption of local planning policy 3.1, which is the city center and northern gateway. And I'll just flag a potential deferral on this item, but if someone can move and second it, we can get into debate. Does someone want to move and second? No? Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Kamada. And again, just if people are inclined to do a deferral, that can be moved at any time.
I moved it so you can move a deferral because it can't be moved until you've actually moved.
I will move a deferral. Is there a seconder for a deferral on this item? Councillor Sullivan. Deferral, the reasons are what I put in the thing earlier, that this needs just, I think, a little more time for everyone to have a very thorough read and provide thoughtful amendments. It's a very great piece of work that the staff has done combining all this, but I think we just need a little bit more time to really think it through as an elected body and potentially get Councillor Graham and Councillor Moughlin's comments as well. Seeing that, we'll put the deferral up for a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. On to item 9, which is the adoption of local planning policy for South Beach Village. Can someone move and second? Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong. Any discussion on the officer's recommendation?
Again, look, I think there was comment that doing this for the sake of 3 vacant lots to the left might have been overkill, but again, the work's essentially been done, so there's no harm in adopting the policy, which effectively just transfers the requirements that would have existed into another era. So thank you for the staff for persevering with that.
Seeing no other comments, we'll put that up for a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Item 10, I'm sorry, I don't think we can do any of these on blocks. We just have to do each one at a time. The Planning Information Report, moved by Councillor Williamson Wong, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the officer's recommendation, that's unanimous. That is carried. Item 11, the city plan for North Fremantle, the community and stakeholder engagement update. Moved by Councillor Van Dorsen, seconded by Councillor Kamada. Any discussion on the item?
Just briefly, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to this briefly, just on the city plan for North Fremantle. So it is just a community and stakeholder engagement update. Thank you to the city officers for doing such great work on this. And I just wanted to confirm, I guess, for the community and publicly that the community engagement is ongoing. We haven't got a final plan yet, so we're working through that. We're reviewing the feedback to date, and we'll continue consulting with the community and other stakeholders before our plan is finalised. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll put it up for a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That item is carried. We are on item 12, which is the private road naming for Monument East development. Moved by Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Clark. Any discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, look, it's again disappointing that we have some names that have got to the point where it's probably too late to seriously entertain asking them to adopt the names that are on our lists. They're very bland kind of names, but at the end of the day, it's 3 private roads, and I'm not going to, use this as a case of beating the developers up. Why didn't you use our names that we've got on our list? I think as a city we can collectively probably do better at making sure that we highlight at the earliest possible stage to proponents that the preferred name list exists so that we can get those into new developments. And I've said that to staff obviously the other day. And I think there is an understanding and an undertaking to do exactly that. So hopefully in the future we'll have better names than Sandstone, which I think pretty well only exists up north. But anyway.
Well said. Councillor Slaughter.
Yeah, I just have a quick question on this that's just occurred to me looking at the pictures again. Whose responsibility is it to determine how many of those are roads? Is that a Landgate issue, given that some of those roads are H-shaped and have multiple parts to them, but all come under one street name, causing confusion perhaps?
I'm going to put that to the relevant staff do we have an answer or take it on notice?
Yeah, we might need to take one on notice. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that question.
It's a great question though, Councillor Slaughter. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll put the item up for a vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. All right, the most exciting item on the docket tonight is item 13. That's a joke, but it's the council member, committee member, and candidate code of conduct review. Would someone like to move that item? Councillor Williamson-Wong, seconded by Councillor Slaughter.
I was only going to say that it is also perhaps incredibly important that we have a code of conduct for us all to behave in line with, but happy to see it come up.
Yes, it is very, very important. I didn't mean to belittle that. I just didn't think we would have a lot of debate on it. And Councillor Sullivan.
Does it include a dress code?
I assume everyone has read the item and knows what's in it. Seeing no other comments, I will put the item up for a vote. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Now on for the real exciting item and our last one for the evening. It's item 14. It's the Douro Road safety. Would someone like to move the officer's recommendation and second that? Moved by Councillor Williamson-Wong, seconded by Councillor Van Dorsen. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
I'm just organising some notes of mine. Look, it's good to see this project come to us for obvious reasons. I'm excited about it, but I'm not entirely happy with exactly how the officer's recommendation has been written. And I'm going to run through the reasons why, some of which I've already shared with elected members. I think that it's, I can understand why officers are bringing us both the road resurfacing project and the Douro Road roundabout project together because it makes sense. That's what we've been asking for. But at the same time, I don't think that we are ready to progress with the Douro Road design in option 3 at this point. So I'm just going to flag that there may be a half deferral or an amendment to the officer's recommendation from myself. But before I do that, I'm going to go through some notes that I wrote down when I was reading this report. I think when I first read the officer's report, it felt as though the idea of formalised zebra crossings at the roundabout was kind of being kicked down the road to deal with later. And then we have a recommendation that we're being asked to endorse that doesn't entirely match that tone. So that was a bit confusing to read, I found. But I guess we know that this is a really big issue for our community. More than 1,300 people were engaged throughout the community engagement. There were 203 formal submissions, and I did talk with Rupert of Harbour Plants earlier today to also note that there was obviously the separate petition which is being dealt with separately because it was asking about zebra crossings for Marine Terrace, South Terrace and Douro Road. So it is separate, but I guess the point being that there is a clear indication that people want pedestrian safety along South Terrace. And I thought it was interesting to note that of the community engagement, 40% of people support the proposed design, but 47% somewhat support, primarily on the basis that the design should be improved further to create better pedestrian priority. So it wasn't that people were somewhat supporting it because it went too far or for whatever reason, it was because they felt that it wasn't quite there. And we all know community have continually highlighted a request for a zebra or a wombat crossing, really a formalised crossing as a treatment type. It was, I think, important for the city to commission an independent road safety audit because the feedback and I guess the conflict of this project that has continually come up is whether or not introducing formalised crossings will make it more dangerous for pedestrians, which was at first hard for me to wrap my head around because it makes no sense, but it does make a little bit more sense when you think about the implications of introducing a formalised crossing. Sometimes apparently pedestrians, rightfully think that they have a right of way and they don't look and then a car hits them, or there's increased risk of rear-ending and such when you're having crossings near roundabouts. So I think to have an expert opinion, I'm not a road safety expert, so to be able to read an expert opinion was important at this point because as a city we are going to be endorsing I guess a design that carries risk, and I want to be able to make sure that I have all of the information in front of me as a decision maker to back whatever choice I make, so that if an accident were to happen, which I really obviously sincerely hope does not happen, that I feel that there was enough information for me to have made the right choice. Following what I've just said about the road safety audit, I think that my problem primarily lies with the idea that, option 3, as provided in attachment 4, currently conflicts with some of the recommendations of the road safety audit. And while I'm very keen to progress this project with a sense of priority and urgency, because I think it would be such a disappointment if it wasn't in by summer when we know that we're going to have way more people down there, etc. I guess I see in the officer's recommendation point 3 being that we're going to support a design in principle for community consultation. If the purpose of that community consultation is to take a design to community at this point, who we already know want formalised crossings, and to say this is the design we're mostly thinking we're going to go with, then it actually needs to be a design that we mostly think we're going to go with. And my reading of the reports was that while officers are saying we can support option 3, our road safety report and the expert advice there recommended some amendments to that design, and there were comments from city staff within that report which say, okay, we're going to take that on board. But then the design we're being asked to endorse tonight doesn't have that. And I guess it doesn't really pass the pub test for me that we would then, I mean, amendments will be made to this design, whether or not it's before community consultation or after, I hope to reflect the recommendations of the road safety report, because we should take safety of all road users into account. So I am flagging some, I've been going back and forth about whether or not it's an amendment or a deferral. I think that there is a way to move an amendment to this item. So I'm going to put it in writing and flag it for now to let further discussion take place and get some wording to the manager of governance. I think the only other points that I wanted to make, I'm just going through my notes, was that we have to respond to our community on this, and we know that there are increased pedestrians in South Terrace, and I guess reading the report, it was kind of somewhat alarming to see that the design we have proposed might have a moderate risk to pedestrian safety, but at the same time, there is no baseline given for what the current risk is. So there's probably, I mean, I'm not an expert, but it would be interesting to know what the baseline risk is currently as it stands. I mean, in the officer's report, it talks about the lighting costs, et cetera, but again, it's not like that risk doesn't exist already, and that potentially, formalising pedestrian priority would make things safer. So let me look. I also, I think the other reason for me to not be happy to support the option 3 at the moment is that this phase of community consultation is also really about being honest with our community that we're going to have some hard conversations about getting formalised crossings in this location. It's looking like that means we will lose trees and that we will lose parking bays. And I don't think we should leave, not be transparent around that at this point. So we've got one shot, we've got to get it right. I know that we need to support the road resurfacing works, which are also not just road resurfacing works, but the curb alignments and etc. Because we have made a commitment to Main Roads that we're going to deliver that project in this financial year, and that we would potentially lose out on budget following, because this would roll over. So I'm happy to support that going forward, and I'm going to let debate continue while I get a proposed amendment with some wording to the manager.
And I'll just say any potential amendment would need to be minor in nature and clarifying as in intent, but happy to have you think of some words and put that forward, and we can make that judgment when we see those words. But a deferral obviously can be moved as procedurally, and I take it we're going to move this item in parts when it comes up for a vote. Councillor Slaughter.
That was actually going to be my question. One of my questions was, are we able to move this in parts? But it looks like that's a yes, so I'll continue. I'd just like to pick up something that Councillor Williamson-Wong pointed out in the engagement report. And those people who said I somewhat support often raised the same things as the people who do not support. And we have so many more people that we did consult with and engage with on this project. And it brings to mind Stephen Street, speed humps, and 7 cyclists potentially postponing that project for a good while. And here we've got a much larger portion of our population, of our residents, our ratepayers and our visitors who are all asking to be heard. And as Councillor Williamson-Wong said, perhaps we haven't been as upfront as we could. Say, if that's what you want, you will lose trees, you will lose car parking spaces. There will be some potential loss of amenity of the area through the things that would have to be changed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of thing we can get here, because I too am worried about supporting in principle a design that people don't seem to want. However, that said, I also acknowledge the financial implications of not acting and losing potential road funding, both momentum for the works as are currently planned, and we have heard that is pretty soon, and then potentially on to next year if that impacts our funding. I think our community would be pleased to know that we would stop and listen for the sake of having to reapply for funding. And I think that is in itself is worth further community engagement for this particular project. And as Councillor Williamson-Wong said, if we give them a plan that we don't know has ironed out the bugs as identified in the traffic audit, are we really getting any further down the road in this one? I don't think we are. So we would need to definitely give them an option that irons out those bugs and really shows that we have taken the safety risks into account, and where will the lighting be? Where will the barriers go? Which trees may or may not have to be removed? So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you, Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. As my colleagues know, I'm not always good at hiding my frustration, but I will try to say what I need to say within the code of conduct version that we currently have. I am frustrated. I hear us talking about community and what they've been asking for and the like. Councillors in this chambers and ones who have already left us have been asking for improvements to this Duro Road precinct and the end of South Terrace for a number of years now. And it was suggested to us that we do a budget item and we look at Duro Road, but we also have a road resurfacing project, and we should have a look at what opportunities we could add in at that time. And of course, it included the roundabout, which frankly, as was suggested to me today, as recently today, again, really, you want a roundabout in an area where you're trying to get a whole heap of pedestrians across the road? That doesn't seem like a good starting point, which is what I said 2.5 years ago. And yet, we were, I guess, told, convinced that there is no way you'll ever get a signalised crossing there, so you've got to stick with the roundabout. We've got to try and make it the precinct pedestrian friendly, and we'll go away and we'll come back with some ideas. What we've got is a resurfacing works program. That's what we've ended up with. So we had an opportunity, it feels, to wrap some significant improvements to pedestrian and cycling in that precinct. We had an opportunity to integrate those ideas into an overall concept, and we've ended up with a resurfacing project instead. Yes, there are some improvements to the movement of vehicles in the roundabout, but that's it, okay? And at the corner. They're not significant. I doubt whether any of the people, the many hundreds of people who've been commenting, will notice that difference when it's built. So it is frustrating for me because what I heard from the community and what I tried to convey in this chamber, and more particularly, in the informal processes that we have outside of this chamber, a whole list of ideas and improvements that should be made to that precinct. And I'm going to list them because, I'm as frustrated as I can possibly get because virtually none of them are part of this or part of the next conversation or the next conversation in a serious way. So the things that the community were asking for, and I certainly was asking for, were a safe and direct pedestrian path across Juro Road to connect South Terrace to the South Beach rail crossing and Wilson Park. Really important. Connectivity, really important route, because people park over there to get to South Terrace. People are at South Terrace having hospitality, want to get to the beach or back to their cars or to Wilson Park. That is a really important route. To improve the north-south pedestrian crossings along Juro Road. Now, that is a project that's going to be considered subsequent to this, so from the roundabout heading east. So hopefully we can achieve some good things in that. It's probably a little bit easier. Bike lanes. This has been an issue on Juro Road for as long as I've been around, that we sort of had these bike lanes, but they're not really bike lanes. And now we know they're not bike lanes, and there are some horrible pinch points for cyclists along Juro Road. And to make things worse, we actually got rid of the cycle lanes on Marine Terrace for some reason at some stage, when we could have had a continuous bike lane system all the way along Marine Terrace. And we absolutely are hearing from the community that we need a proper bike solution for Juro Road as well. And a proper bike solution for Juro Road does not mean a slightly fatter footpath where people have to ride past every crossover and go across every side road in the journey along the way. So we wanted the bike lanes reinstated along Marine Terrace. That's a major project, really difficult to achieve because of what we have done to fix. We fixed one problem, we put in some extra parking, but we took out the bloody bike lanes, and now we've got a problem to put the bike lanes in, and we've suddenly put all the trees in as well, all the landscaping, and then when we go to put the bike lanes in, we're going to have to pull all of that out, and people are going to be wondering, what the hell is Fremantle Council doing, right? We have had an opportunity to review the profile or the radius of the curvature on the corner of Juro Road and Marine Terrace, where there is a significant amount of land. Now, the reason it's a little bit of a problem intersection is because when we put that bloody car park in, we changed the direction of the roads and made the corner even weirder in its configuration. But there was plenty of opportunity in this process to seriously entertain that intersection. If it meant coming back to the city, the city coming back to council and saying, look, we can achieve some really good things here, we might just need an extra budget in addition to the resurfacing budget, then we probably would have been all ears. But that wasn't brought to us. We know that there are issues with some of the trees in that area. One of them, the big Moreton Bay, is dying. That Moreton Bay, if you were to do a road safety order on the existing roundabout, they'd be saying that Moreton Bay's got to go. It probably flips it from being moderate to a higher level. So there are things that do need to change in that area. We also know, and this is a bit that doesn't really come from the community, but it certainly comes from our obligation in terms of the road transport environment in Fremantle, is that we can't squeeze every road down to being a local road. You know, people do need to get to the city centre from the south and from the east, and they have options like Hampton Road, they have an option like South Terrace, they have an option in Marine Terrace, and Juro Road connects those latter two. So we do have to accept that there is a requirement to get traffic through there. But we do also have an opportunity to decide which of those roads should carry the greater volume. Now, I know there are people who are living on Marine Terrace who will absolutely hate me saying this, but guess what? Marine Terrace is a road that can absolutely carry a greater volume of cars than the rapidly developing South Terrace in South Fremantle. So for me, a solution has always been, we need a threshold area to identify to people that South Terrace is a destination, and yes, you can get from one end to the other, but please don't expect to get through that system fast. and it needs to be reflected in the urban environment that exists at that moment. I was there on the weekend and I was stunned by how many people currently, particularly on the weekend, not so much during the weekday, but how many people on the weekend basically come down Juro Road and head straight for South Terrace. And I'm not sure whether they're going to that destination or they're just cruising. Because let's face it, Fremantle people love to get in their cars and cruise, and they cruise past the coffee shops just like they always used to do in the cappuccino strip. So maybe that's what's going on. But, you know, they've got to do it slowly, and we've got to let them know that it is a destination. So all of those things were elements that, for me, needed to be considered, discussed, brought together in an integrated way so that we could be looking at real solutions, not just, you know, a resurfacing project that doesn't really change very much. My frustration is that the sorts of things that I think the community need to achieve their goals will essentially require us to make radical or reasonable changes to the very area that we're about to resurface. And it's not just sort of, oh, we can plonk a crosswalk across. We're actually going to need to do other things to that area. And so we're going to get a two-thirds funded section of nice red bitumen, and then somewhere fairly soon down the track, we'll either be digging it up or simply not achieving the sorts of things the community are looking for in that area. So that's incredibly frustrating. You know, what am I expected to do about it when we are given at the 11th and a half hour the solutions that basically aren't really solutions, and told that if we don't go ahead, we're going to lose the money and we won't get the resurfacing, or it's going to cost us more, or whatever. Of course, the council, not necessarily me, but the council's going to say, okay, well, I guess we better put the resurfacing in. But this is not the way to treat our community, because our community deserves so much better than that. And I look around, as you know, I've circulated you images from the wonderful greater city of Melbourne, and I know that the sorts of things that the community came to us and asked us to do are being done and have been done in Melbourne for decades, right? And I don't see the sorts of pushback in terms of design and engineering in those communities that we seem to be dealing with in our community. So I will leave it at that, because I can see that I've probably spent my time and maybe stepping over that wonderful code of conduct boundary. But I absolutely need to say those things in a public forum. Yeah, I hope that we can learn from this and really start to pull our straps up collectively and do better into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I think we really heard what you were saying, and I apologize if my seeking some advice on a potential amendment was distracting at all during that, but I did hear almost everything that you said. So thank you for those words. Are there any other comments on the item? Councillor Williamson Wong.
Thanks. I will move my amendment, please, as shown on the screen and flagged earlier.
Yes, and I'll just say that
If you're happy to accept it.
I will be for a couple of reasons. One, it's not changing the intent of the overall motion. Two, been advised by staff that this is a more desirable way rather than deferring part of a motion. And three, it really is clarifying more than a potential deferral as to what we would like to see, even though essentially it is a deferral on part of the
Yes.
thing. So for those reasons, I think we just got there as a clarifying amendment, and I'm happy to accept it as a minor amendment if there's a seconder. Well, it's seconded by Councillor Sullivan, so now it can be open for debate.
I will talk to the amendment. Thanks, Councillor Sullivan, for seconding it. I guess, as I flagged before, I wasn't comfortable. I'm still not comfortable with the idea that we would go out for this final bit of community consultation on a design that actually our staff were not. It didn't appear that they would be willing to deliver. And I think that's an honest conversation that we should have about risk to pedestrians and also the desired overall outcome for this area. Interestingly, some of what Councillor Sullivan is talking about in terms of looking at projects holistically can be done even in this next iterative stage, although disappointing that it is also being done in a piecemeal way. For example, the removal of the median strip on the western side of Douro Road, which was included as a recommendation of the road safety audit, or rather the recommendation was that it's quite unconventional for there to be a median strip in the middle of a Wombat zebra crossing, would allow for further opportunities potentially for other cycling outcomes. Not desirable, but possible, perhaps. So yes, the reason that this amendment is there is to just clarify that we are seeking staff to go and do that bit of work that incorporates the findings of the road safety audit into the final draft proposed design that we would then seek comment on, with the understanding that this stage of consultation is not about whether or not people support in principle zebra crossings and wombat crossings at Douro Road roundabout, but more specifically, where are they located? What are those trade-offs going to be? And although I don't like to have lots of words in amendments, I did just note what that should include consideration of being an open-ended list. There may be other things in the road safety audit that I've missed as conflicting with the proposed design in option 3. Yeah.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I supported this because I think it is procedurally a better approach to further consulting with the community. I think, if we're going to go back to them and say, well, here is another version, it needs to be the version that's actually workable, that the staff hopefully would be able to get behind, because it hopefully takes the moderate risk down to low risk, which is the lowest risk you can have. It can't be lower than low risk. There is no such thing as no risk. So hopefully it could be brought forward as a design that at least gets it down to low risk. I would just request, if the mover's comfortable with it, in B, part B, where it says removal, can I suggest removal / modification? Because I'm not sure which would actually be required, and that just leaves it a bit more open for staff, because removal might actually be the wrong option.
Yep, and I'll just note all those are contained in the road safety audit, and they're just consideration of, so that we're not changing the original recommendation by including. Any other discussion on the minor amendment? Do we vote on those? Great. Seeing none, we'll put this minor amendment up for a vote. All those in favor? That's unanimous. So we have an item as amended, minorly. So we're back to the substantive item. Any other discussion on the substantive item? Seeing none, did you wish to close, Jemima?
Yes, thank you. Look, it's good to know that we're going to be talking about the Douro Road roundabout again shortly with a finalised design, but I do want to take the opportunity to, I guess, make some comments I forgot to before, and also respond to some of what Councillor Sullivan said, because I think I echo that there is I feel confused, and I think our community feels confused as to why when there's a proposal for a design that seems to exist in many other places around Australia and around the world, there is pushback for one reason or another, whether that is coming from different agencies or different desired outcomes for risk. I'm not sure, but it is bizarre that there are many roundabouts that have formalised crossings in many different settings that we seem to not be able to get. I guess I also just want to make clear my position is that it would not be an acceptable outcome to have only a crossing along South Terrace, which is mentioned in the officer's report in terms of the option 2, and that is also Councillor Sullivan is saying the desire and I guess the community need at the moment is to be able to get from, oh, we're testing me, the eastern side of South Terrace to South Beach. And if we are only getting people from the eastern side of South Terrace to the western side of South Terrace, then we're not doing our job at all. And so I just want to make that clear. We also need to do this project specific to this roundabout and then continue to look at the rest of the improvements for pedestrian accessibility, safety and priority along South Terrace, Marine Terrace and South Fremantle more broadly. There's been discussion that perhaps improvements along South Terrace or elsewhere will fix this. It may alleviate some pressure on this specific intersection, but we all know that this is the crunch point when you're accessing South Beach and South Terrace. So I want to, I guess, also reiterate my support for this being dealt with now, while ongoing conversations following the petition continue on. And I have one fun note for the next officer report that comes back. A wombat crossing is not, what did they say in the report? It's a formal term. It doesn't get referred to as a formal term in our officer report, so minor note for next time, please. Please write that as a formal term next time. But on a more serious note, I think when we have grant funding come in for resurfacing projects, it's obviously a win for us because we are getting money to do projects that we need to do. We have many roads that need upgrading. We know that these are kind of routine and standard operations of a local government. But just as Councillor Sullivan was setting out, I hope that officers can understand and also respond to the comments made by Councillor Sullivan, and I'm going to support them, that these projects and this funding is not just, they shouldn't be seen just as an infrastructure project, but really as an opportunity to look at whatever is going on in that area. This was the perfect example to look more holistically at the Douro Road intersection and the way that we move traffic through South Terrace, because we know that it's an issue. And the kind of response, or the way, I guess, the feeling of the project has been that it's just this infrastructure project and that there's this community want for zebra crossings on the side. And I don't think that that's right. I mean, if we have all of this money, then we should be making sure we're using it to the best ability that we can. We know that as a city, we want to, not rely more on our grant funding, but we want to increase our grant funding, and that it plays a really important role in also delivering the infrastructure projects that we need. But we shouldn't just see it as an infrastructure project. And I guess I reiterate Councillor Sullivan's points on that and hope that our staff and directors can see that that's what we're really asking for here, is that when money comes in for things that may look like it's just in one directorate or bucket, that we're taking a holistic view, because we all want to see our money spent in the best way that it can be. So thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. The term in the report is that wombat crossings are an affectionate term. They are a formal term for that proposed design. I'm still yet to do my research on why they're called a wombat crossing. I hope it's not because if you hit a wombat, you go up in the air, because that doesn't feel affectionate, but minor one from me. And thank you for our conversation tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong, and perhaps it's both affectionate and formal. So we're voting on the item before us. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Great. Okay, everyone, we have no statutory reports. We have no committee and working group reports. We have no motions of which previous notice has been given, no urgent business, no late items, no confidential business. And that brings our meeting to a close at 8:53 p.m. Thank you, everyone. We did it.
you.